On this Saturday night, a final farewell to the People's Pope. World leaders, dignitaries, and hundreds of thousands from around the world gather in Rome.
You mourn a friend because I got to know him.
To pay their last respects to Pope Francis, honoring a man whose impact transcended religion. An unscheduled and unlikely summit. Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky meet at the Vatican.
We had a productive meeting
to discuss peace. And a tightening race to the finish line. But is it too late to make up lost ground?
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Pallbearers carried the modest wooden coffin of Pope Francis into St. Peter's Square today. An estimated 250,000 people attended his open-air funeral. The ceremony drew an extraordinary mix of world leaders, royalty, and dignitaries from around the world, alongside hundreds of thousands of mourners who also lined the streets of Rome. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Pope Francis was eulogized as a pope among the people. He died on Easter Monday at the age of 88 after suffering a stroke. Redmond Shannon was at the Vatican today.
Many waited through the night to be part of a congregation like no other. Tens of thousands of pilgrims and tourists from every corner of the world are here to witness a moment of history. The faithful and clergy, joined by those who just wanted to be here.
We thought we must take advantage of this, come here, join everyone and be in the moment on such a momentous event.
A huge security operation protecting political leaders and heads of state. Donald Trump paying his respects at the closed coffin, ahead of his remarkable Basilica meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky to discuss the war in Ukraine. Some of the crowd applauded the Ukrainian president as he took his seat. The service led by Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, who also spoke of the horrors of war.
La guerra è solo morte di persone.
The Dean of the College of Cardinals paying tribute to Francis's legacy of being a champion for peace and for showing compassion toward migrants. The Pope's coffin then brought on its final journey, not to a tomb in St. Peter's as is usually the case with popes, but on a procession through the streets of Rome to his favoured basilica of St. Mary Major, his pallbearers pausing by a shrine where he often prayed, before his burial in a plain tomb inscribed with the word Franciscus.
So when I came here today, of course you mourn a friend because I got to know him.
Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak sat with other dignitaries at the service. She says she's thankful for Francis's residential school's apology and that she spoke with Vatican officials Saturday about the return of Indigenous Canadian artefacts from the Vatican museums.
We hope that the new Pope will continue to work with us in a good way, the way that Pope Francis has.
As for that new Pope, well, the College of Cardinals will begin the conclave likely no earlier than May 6th. The exact date has yet to be confirmed. Colleen?
Redmond Shannon at the Vatican. Thanks, Redmond. The Archbishop of Buenos Aires was moved to tears during an emotional mass in honor of Pope Francis in his hometown. The late pontiff was born in Buenos Aires. He made history in 2013 when he was elected as the first Latin American pope in the Catholic Church's history. We will have more on Pope Francis's legacy, including a deeper look into his tireless efforts to promote peace, even in the most dire global conflicts. Before attending the Pope's funeral, U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met for an impromptu peace talk inside St. Peter's Basilica. Their face-to-face meeting, their first since that disastrous Oval Office encounter in February. Candace Cole reports on what was said and how Trump's patience with Russia seems to be wearing thin.
For the first time since their explosive meeting in the Oval Office in February, U.S. President Donald Trump and embattled Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met face-to-face in St. Peter's Basilica just before the funeral service for Pope Francis began. The 15-minute sit-down was said to be, quote, very productive, according to a White House spokesperson. After their meeting, Zelensky posting on X that it was a good meeting with hopes for a, quote, full and unconditional ceasefire and lasting peace to prevent another war. While at the Vatican, crowds gathered for the funeral met Zelensky with cheers and applause in a show of solidarity. He later met with other European heads of state, including Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, French President Emmanuel Macron, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, all in a show of support.
We had a productive meeting, and we want to continue such meetings to bring peace to Ukraine.
As Zelensky hangs on to hope, Putin once again is claiming victory over Russia's Kursk region after Ukrainian forces seized control of it last August. The complete defeat of the enemy in the Kursk borderland creates conditions for further successful actions of our troops in other important areas of the front. Earlier this week, Trump urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to, quote, stop his attacks on Ukraine following his deadly bombardment of Kyiv, which was met with even more Russian bombing. Saturday, Trump took to Truth Social saying maybe Putin, quote, doesn't want to stop the war. He's just tapping me along. He suggested slapping Putin with secondary sanctions. Candace Cole, Global News, Washington.
To the federal election campaign, where party leaders are making their final pitches 2 days before voters head to the polls. Today, Liberal leader Mark Carney emphasized Donald Trump's threats against Canada and how he's the only one who can tackle them. Meanwhile, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is focused on BC in a last-ditch bid to sway undecided voters. We begin with Mackenzie Gray on the Liberal campaign.
Feeding off the energy of the crowd.
Can you guys come with me for the next 2 days? It would be fantastic.
The Liberal leader pushed into the final 48 hours, barely talking about his Canadian opponents.
My question to Canadians is simple. Is Pierre Poilievre the person you want sitting across the table from Donald Trump?
Instead, focusing almost exclusively on the Americans, his campaign's central theme.
President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us.
Carney has used that line dozens of times on the stump, referencing what he calls attacks on Canada by Trump. But what form could that take?
Is there a scenario, in your view, where they use or try to use military force to accomplish those goals?
No. Short answer, Alex, is no.
Instead, the Liberal leader believes Trump is attempting to make Canada deeply economically dependent on the Americans.
The U.S. is trying to put economic pressure on us to gain major concessions that would impinge our sovereignty.
Protecting Canadian sovereignty, a motivating factor for many voters, which polls show could be the reason the Liberals potentially win a majority on Monday. That will give Carney the strong mandate he's been asking for, and make him the Prime Minister past when Trump's term is scheduled to end.
This is what we need to do in a crisis.
A date Carney mused during the English debate that the president might not respect.
Mr. Trump will be 90 years old, not president no more, and somebody off.
Saturday, Carney backing away from those comments.
So do you think he will stay on past his term?
You're listening very closely. Do I believe I believe he'll respect the Constitution.
The Liberals are spending Saturday barnstorming the Greater Toronto Area and southwestern Ontario, but on Sunday, the final day of the campaign, they're expected to launch an air raid on Conservative and NDP ridings, flying to Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, and BC, before taking the red-eye back to Ottawa for election.
I'm Touria Izri covering the Conservatives. Pierre Poilievre is spending the final stretch blitzing two key battlegrounds, Southern Ontario and Metro Vancouver, where he needs to convince suburban voters he should become the next Prime Minister. One of the last chances for the Conservative message to land.
British Columbia, who's voting for change?
Pierre Poilievre is making his closing arguments to voters in BC, where multiple seats are at play. Poilievre has set his sights on the province, holding some of his final rallies in Nanaimo and Metro Vancouver. The possible collapse of the NDP has left a void the Conservatives and Liberals are fighting to fill.
This is one where BC may matter. You could easily see them, either party getting somewhere between 15 and 25 seats. And so that gap of 10 from minimum to maximum may be enough to move from majority to minority.
You know, the number one cost in a new home here in British Columbia is taxes.
At the finish line, Poilievre is spending less time than his Liberal rival, focusing on U.S. President Donald Trump. Instead, he's concentrating on the housing crisis, building pipelines, and combating crime.
You don't feel safe walking down the street.
The Conservative leader is vowing to usher in the single largest crackdown on criminals in Canadian history.
We will bring in mandatory life sentences for any mass trafficker of fentanyl.
These are all issues that are really important to British Columbians, and certainly were before we got into these issues with the U.S. and Mark Carney came on the scene.
After BC, Poilievre's next stop is Sudbury. From Northern Ontario, he then goes south. Poilievre will visit the Greater Toronto Area on the last day of the campaign. He must pick up seats in the 905 to form government and to stop the Liberals from winning a fourth victory in a row. Colleen?
Thanks, Touria. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is making a final pitch for votes in parts of the country he thinks the party stands a chance. The NDP is trailing badly in the polls and could lose official party status. But Neetu Garcha is here to tell us Singh is using those same polls to make a pitch that a vote for the NDP is not a vote for the Conservatives. Neetu.
That's right, Colleen. Jagmeet Singh has been making his final pitch to voters in battleground Ontario, and this as he reveals that the RCMP alerted him to a credible threat to his life, putting him under police protection for weeks. It happened 2 winters ago and came about a year before former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau claimed Canada had evidence connecting Indian agents to the killing of Canadian Sikh Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Singh, who's also Sikh, considered whether to step down as leader. He says it was the rollout of Canada's dental care program that kept him moving forward. And today he answered questions about why he decided to reveal the threat now, just before the election.
I've been hearing more and more stories, private conversations with people telling me about what they've gone through and the ongoing threats that continue to happen for Canadians around foreign interference. Because if it could happen to you and you're an elected official at such a high platform and at such a high position, what about us, ordinary folks?
Now, as mentioned, Singh was making his final pitch to progressive voters in battleground Ontario, saying the Conservatives won't win this election, so there's no need to strategically vote for the Liberals. The NDP, though, Colleen, is trailing badly in the polls. Some polls even suggest Singh's in danger of losing his own seat in Burnaby, but Singh denied that today. He's traveling to Metro Vancouver tonight ahead of a series of events tomorrow. Colleen?
Thank you, Neetu. Nova Scotia's premier is publicly calling out the separatist leader of the Bloc Québécois. This was Yves-François Blanchet on the campaign trail yesterday.
We are, either we like it or not, part of an artificial country with very little meaning called Canada.
In response, Premier Tim Houston wrote Blanchet saying, "I find it difficult to find the words to adequately describe how insulting this statement is to all Canadians." Houston says if an elected official can't take pride in their own country, they have no business running for public office. Donna Friesen will anchor our live coverage of the federal election on Monday. Decision Canada starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific on Global and all of our streaming platforms. Coming up, nuclear negotiations as the U.S. and Iran make progress in talks. An explosion at an Iranian port kills 5 and injures hundreds. In Iran, at least 5 people are dead and more than 700 injured after a huge explosion at a port in the southern part of the country. Tonight, a private security firm called Ombre is reporting that in March, the port took in a shipment of chemicals used to power Iran's missiles. The report says the fire was the result of improper storage of those chemicals. Global News is unable to independently confirm that. Iranian leaders say there are no indications this is a deliberate attack intended to disrupt negotiations with the U.S. over Iran's nuclear program. Those talks took place in Oman today.
مذاکرات این بار خیلی جدی‌تر از گذشته بود.
Iran's foreign minister says serious progress was made in this, the third round of talks that have now concluded in Oman. But Abbas Araghchi also said further negotiations with Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff are needed to address the extent to which Iran can develop its nuclear program in exchange for the removal of U.S. sanctions. RCMP in Ontario have arrested a man for allegedly attempting to leave Canada to join a terrorist group. Authorities say the 32-year-old was arrested under terrorism peace bond provisions. His name is not being released at this time due to a publication ban. The suspect appeared in court in Brampton on Sunday. He remains in custody and will make another court appearance at a later date. Ahead, why go fish may be the message Atlantic Canada sends to one of the federal parties. Fisheries are a way of life in much of Atlantic Canada. The industry holds many economies and coastal communities together, but it has also become a source of turmoil in recent years. Heidi Petrachuk looks at how fishery troubles could shape the vote.
Edward Hunt was too busy catching lobster to cast an advance ballot in the federal election, but come Monday...
I am. And I'm a PC guy too.
While polls suggest a Liberal sweep on the East Coast, Hunt's dissatisfaction with the Liberal government on fisheries issues outweighs anything else.
What Trudeau did to us is out of this world.
We've also had, I believe it is 6 or 7 fisheries ministers in 8 years.
Violence and poaching have plagued the lobster and elver fisheries in Nova Scotia in recent years, and tensions between commercial harvesters and First Nations exercising treaty rights have flared.
We certainly feel like we're left out of a lot of conversations that are detrimental to the future of the resource, but also frankly our living.
In Newfoundland and Labrador, cuts to crab quotas and Ottawa's decision to bring back commercial cod fishing have also fueled frustration.
Folks are feeling very disappointed and haven't seen the results that they needed. Even if they think Mark Carney is the right guy to run this whole mess with Trump, are people's concerns about the handling of the fisheries enough for them to vote against Mark Carney?
A key question for the region's 8 PC incumbents.
I don't prejudge the vote. Whatever happens, happens. But you look at the polls and it's hard to see any pickups for the Conservatives.
No matter which party forms the next government, some people who rely on fisheries for their living say what they'd really like to see next is a relationship reset with Ottawa.
A lot of the rapport that we have had with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans over the years that harvesters worked very, very hard to get has been lost.
The one thing that we would like to see from any future Prime Minister and any future Minister is a return to science-based fisheries management.
The Liberals and the Conservatives have each made fisheries promises, trying to reel in the most votes. Heidi Petrachuk, Global News, Lunenburg, Nova Scotia.
Next, remembering a pope who worked for peace. Pope Francis will definitely be remembered for his efforts to make the church more open and progressive, but he's also being remembered for his work in promoting the importance of peace, even in places where there seems little hope for it. As Jeff Semple reports, the pontiff pushed for an end to violence up until his last breath.
During his final days in hospital, Pope Francis received letters from children around the world, including war zones.
This is from Gaza.
This card, with a drawing of a broken heart bandaged together, is written in Italian and Arabic. To His Holiness Pope Francis, it says, from the children of Gaza.
I think it's wonderful.
Father Enzo Fortunato was appointed by the Pope to organize the first World Children's Day last year to highlight the plight of children in Ukraine and Gaza. Fortunato says every day at 7 p.m., Pope Francis would drop everything, abruptly end meetings, to phone Gaza's only Catholic church, even while he was in hospital in critical condition.
And this is extraordinary. I think this witness is the wonderful example of love.
After many months of war in Gaza, the church is still standing, though they've had close calls.
and it's unbelievable.
Elisabetta Piqué is an Argentinian journalist covering the Vatican. She first met Pope Francis back in 2001 when he was still Jorge Bergoglio, Archbishop of Buenos Aires. Over the years, they kept in touch, and he always asked her about her time as a foreign correspondent, reporting from war zones.
What is happening there is something very, very terrible, and he is his way to be close also to this terrible reality.
As Pope, Francis relentlessly pushed for peace. He invited 2 delegations to the Vatican, relatives of Israeli hostages and family members of Palestinians imprisoned by Israel. He also hosted Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and begged Russian President Vladimir Putin to stop this spiral of violence and death.
And Pope Francis is doing a lot to help us to move in this direction.
This professor of economics and international politics is now teaching a new subject, the science of peace.
This is a new way of looking at the problems.
Pope Francis launched the university program, which brings together experts in law, social science, political science, and economics. They also invite ordinary people on opposing sides of war to live together here in Italy for months, including Ukrainians and Russians, and Israelis and Palestinians.
I think this is a very good opportunity for the young students to learn a new language.
Teaching the language of peace and the practical, difficult steps to achieve it to a new generation, ensuring that even after death, the Pope's message of peace lives on. Jeff Semple, Global News, Rome.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Colleen Christie. Tonight's Your Canada showcases Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, the RCMP musical ride in Ottawa, and Bennett Lake, BC. Send your pictures of Canadian pride to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a good night.